Welcome to the 2024 Traveller Mayday Mayday event. I'm your host, Frank Succardi from CyborgPrime Games. In the studio with me, my guest, Mr. Matthew Sprange of Mongoose Publishing. Welcome, Matthew.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. I super appreciate your support for this event. It means a lot to me, so thank you for returning. You must be very, very busy as the CEO. What's your title there? President?
Managing Director.
Managing Director. So why don't you give us a little overview of who you are and what you do for folks who are joining us for the first time?
Yeah. Well, I'm the Managing Director of Mongoose Publishing, publishers of the Traveller RPG. We've been running with Traveller for many years now, and my job is basically running the company and making sure products come out and that they're good.
All right, cool. Well, I think you're doing a good job at that myself. So you have my seal of approval for what it's worth. So why don't you give us a little history about how you got into gaming and how you eventually became the owner of Mongoose?
I started very young in primary school with the solo game books of the day. You could argue that I started even earlier. That when I was taken to see Star Wars when I was like 4 years old, and that kind of like burned in my brain, and I've never been quite the same since. And once you link up Star Wars with gaming, that's a road you don't walk back down from. Started with the solo game books. Started RPGs with Redbox Basic D&D, and from there moved to Judge Dredd. Traveller was the third game started playing, and that took up most of my teenage years. Got into the Warhammer and miniatures gaming as well. And at some point in my mid to late 20s, I thought, hello, wouldn't it be fun if we started a games company? So we did, and here I am.
Fantastic. Was it super difficult to start your own games company, or did you just kind of naturally click into it? I mean, had you run businesses before?
No, not at all. I had a business partner. He came from what was back then 3G phones. I'd been working as a field engineer in IT. Neither of us knew anything about publishing. I'd done some writing, a little bit, tiny bit of freelance writing for Games Workshop. Mm-hmm. But we figured, two guys in their mid-20s, how hard can it be kind of attitude. And we just hit every problem head on like a bullet at a gate, and somehow managed to survive getting through them.
When you sat down to do your business plan, I mean, because starting a games company isn't something that banks see every day. Were there any special hurdles or strangeness there? Do people go out like, what is this? Can you explain this better to us?
No, not. The benefit we had is we started Mongoose on an absolute shoestring. I think the figure was £8,000 that my business partner Alex and I managed to string together from our jobs. And we figured with that we could release one product a month for 3 months without any gaps and without any income at all. The idea being that if any distributors were funny about payment, because we didn't know the industry at all, then we could at least survive. Mm-hmm. So no, we didn't need to borrow any cash at all.
Oh, wow, fantastic. Self-funding is a pretty awesome way. I put myself through school. I never had to take a loan, and it just gave me a lot of freedom. So, yes. Yeah, cool. So how did you, so back in the early days, you started out doing like D&D modules, is that right?
The very first products we released were the Slayer's Guides, released under the D20 logo license and OGL. Because we were late to the D20 party. It had already been going for nearly a year before we got involved. And I drew up a big list of every company that had either released a D20 product or had announced one, and there was over 100. And because we were self-funded, we didn't have a lot of money going around, so we had to do the same thing that everybody else was doing, which was a 32-page softback book. And our original plan was to do what everyone else had done and was release 3 adventures that way. But I was sitting in the pub one evening and I thought, hello, why are we doing exactly the same thing as everybody else? How the hell would we stand out that way?
Right, especially as a newcomer to the group, right?
Exactly. Nobody knew us from Adam. We hadn't had any background in the industry or the market. We were locked into the format because we could only afford the 32-page books. And I remembered the ecology articles of the old Dragon magazine, and I thought, I think I could expand the concept of those articles to 32 pages.
Oh, I see.
So you pick one monster, go through its physiology, its psychology, the habitats. You have a layer at the back of it, so it includes a mini adventure in there, and you talk about the characters and how they interact with their own magic systems and what have you. And you've got a completely new product. That immediately got people's attentions, and because we had set things up so we were had one new release every single month, people, the distributors and retailers saw we were a serious outfit, whatever our actual background was. And because we were doing something different, they put our books on their shelves. The next series we released were the Encyclopedia Arcanes, which was a similar idea, but we got up to 64-page softbacks. And each one of those introduced a new magic system, like demonology and necromancy and what have you. But about 6-7 months after we started, we released the first of the quintessential books, 128-page softbacks, which were focused purely on one class, 4 players. So the quintessential fighter was the first one we released. And that hit the market like an absolute bullet. Because we were releasing one book a line per series by that time, there was a constant movement of new quintessential books coming out, so we managed to cover all the classes, all the races, and I can't tell you, they were being bought in lumps. At one point, in what would this have been, early 2002, we were selling one book every 30 seconds.
Wow.
It was just incredible. I mean, we were working in our own bedrooms to begin with, but that got us into a proper office. And the quintessentials, we did one book a month for 3 years.
Wow.
On that.
Yeah, it seems like plenty of material to go through.
Oh yeah.
All right. Sorry, I misunderstood that they were when you said 32-page adventure format, I thought you were doing adventures, but you were doing source books.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't remember when we did our first adventure. It might have been like 2 or 3 years into the company.
No. Okay. So, how did that eventually lead you to purchasing or getting involved with the Traveller license and also the Paranoia license as well? I guess you did them both at the same time.
It was very close together. I mean, we'd already started mucking around with licenses fairly early on. The first one was Judge Dredd, and we started talking about doing that within like the first 6 months of the company starting. And we were mulling around what properties to try and license, and one of us mentioned Judge Dredd, wondered who owned Judge Dredd, and it turns out the owner was a company called Rebellion, a video games company, and they were just like 20 miles up the road from us. Oh. So we rocked up there, spoke to the owner. Turns out he was an old role player who was really into Tunnels and Trolls, and in fact Rebellion's recently bought Tunnels and Trolls. Oh. And so, yeah, he was all over it. So we got that license. On the strength of that, we managed to talk to Warner Brothers and got the Babylon 5 license. But our golden rule has always been we're not looking for the games that we know will sell and make us squillions of pounds, because that's really not going to happen anyway. We want to produce the games we actually want to play. Well, I've been playing Traveller and Paranoia since I was like 12 years old. As Mark Miller is so happy for me to remind him. Yeah, I mean, that was just a case of finding out who were the current owners of those properties were, and literally giving them a phone call saying, hey, this is us, we can do this, we love your games, please give us a license.
Cool. How did you go from like fantasy to sci-fi? Were you always just interested in sci-fi, and you were doing the D20 fantasy stuff for commercial reasons, or were you playing that stuff at the time and then you were like, well, I really like sci-fi more, so let's go do this thing?
No, I fantasy and sci-fi, love them both all the time, always, and that goes for games, fiction, video games, films, the whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite happy to watch Lord of the Rings and immediately go into Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of crossover between those two, markets, I guess you'd say, which is, I don't know, kind of weird, but also not weird, because the stories seem the same, not the same, but stories that you could tell in sci-fi space opera are very similar to the stories that you could tell in a fantasy game. They're just sci-fi-ified.
Always thought that all science fiction is rooted some way in the real world. Fantasy can be, but it doesn't have to be.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, because like D&D's, there was never, it's based in like a medieval style, but there was never a medieval time where people were running around doing magic, right? So, but everybody has the group image of what the world looks like in their mind. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah. So, so you got the Paranoia license and the Traveller license, and then did you immediately start producing, or did you have to take some time to like figure out what how you're going to proceed, or did you already have ideas in the idea hopper?
You have ideas knocking around, but to go from yes, we've got the license to a fully released product, no, you do have to take a step back and think, right, how are we going to do this? What did we like about the old editions? How has game design moved on? And try to ignore the fads.
Right. Okay. So in the early days of why did you choose the name Mongoose?
We had an A4 sheet of paper this was in the pub. My business partner and I, we just wrote down loads and loads of ideas. At one point, we were going to call ourselves Cosmic Mongoose, but no, we picked Mongoose in the end. And the idea was we should probably base it around an animal, because we could have like a cute icon logo for the company based around the animal. And in 23 years, we have never done that. So really want to get around to
it. That's funny. Oh well, stuff happens like that,
Yeah.
So all right. How were the early days of Mongoose? Were you pleased with was first edition first edition Mongoose Traveller, was that the first Traveller, the first of the Traveller line that you were doing?
It was, yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been rooted in classic Traveller as a teenager, so it made a lot of sense to me, bearing in mind that we want to produce the games that we want to play ourselves. So it was just a very natural thing to start our editions of Traveller in the same mould or a similar mould, but updated for a more modern audience. So that's why you get the unified task system, the expanded life path with the events built into it, etc.
Mm-hmm. Were boons and banes in the first edition, or were those added in second?
That was second edition.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So after after you produced your Mongoose First Edition, how long was it until you came out with second, and what prompted you to do that?
This is the bane of game designer. When do you start working on the next edition? Well, probably in a way the day after you release the previous one, because there's always sometimes you have to kind of stop yourself designing. And there's the old the saying that a movie is you don't finish making a movie, it gets abandoned. And it's a similar thing with game design as well, because you could just keep on tweaking forever until everything feels right, and it won't, because you always come up with new ideas. So you start drawing up a big list of cool things that you might want to put into a new edition.
Mm-hmm. And then when it just gets to a certain, like, you go a certain breaking point or whatever, you're like, okay, this is enough for a book, or how do you?
It could be anything. For the first release of the second edition, we wanted to update all the artwork because we'd followed very closely the format of the classic Traveller books. So black and white interiors, line art, etc., which was fine, and it was the right choice to do for the first release of Traveller, but it was part of our plan to drag Traveller kicking and screaming into the 21st century by doing a full colour book. And if you're going to do a full colour book, well, you may as well take a look at the text. And if you're going to do that, then it's probably time to make some changes and tweaks. And second edition is more of an evolution, to the extent that you can more or less take a first edition adventure and run it through second edition with any changes you can do on the fly. But we did the Core Rulebook Update 2022 to keep things fresh. The main impetus for that wasn't rules-based at all. We'd got some new graphic designers in the office, and they've been doing some great work on Traveller supplements. And they say, look, we really need to look at the core rule book. It was fine back then, but we're so much better now. We can make this really, really pretty book. And it just so happens the end of that particular print run was in sight. So great, let's do this update idea. Let's take a look at a few rules, bits and pieces while we're at it, incorporate errata and put a couple of new bits and bobs that we've been thinking about in it. And that, I think, for the foreseeable future is going to be the pattern of it, rather than releasing a new edition, releasing these updates to the core books, hopefully forever. The challenge is always going to be keeping them compatible, so any version of those rulebooks can be used at the table, which at the moment, with the things we're looking at in the future, I think is going to be possible. I do suspect many years in the future we might have a Ship of Theseus problem, whereby we've changed all the components, and so the book we've just released actually isn't the same as the first, second edition, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Right. Well, I think you've done a good job of staying backwards compatible, because recently I started a new Mongoose Traveller game with some friends, and I was going through my old stuff. I was like, Death Station. And so I pulled out my old Death Station and ran it, and it hardly needed any kind of changing at all.
Nah.
So, the new system is pretty... You maintain that spirit of classic, and I think brought it forward and modernized it really successfully. So kudos to you for that. So the let's see. Let's talk about what you've been up to since last time we met. You had you were talking about Pioneer and some other things that were on the horizon. You want to talk about any of those things?
Oh, yeah. I mean, as is the way of things, a lot of stuff is still on the horizon, although we are getting a bit closer to the horizon. So Pioneer's in the final stages of development. I think it's going to be early 2025 when it comes out. We're just starting to look at the layout format because it's going to have its own crisp look. It won't look like other Traveller books.
Mm-hmm. It's going to have its own branding. Is that? And
yes, okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's any Traveller player is going to get to grips with it immediately, but it's its own core rule book. It's its own game.
Gotcha.
Just happens to use core Traveller rules. The other one, it was the Fifth Frontier War, which I think for 4 or 5 years now we've been saying it's coming out next year. But I can finally say that as we record this, it's coming out tomorrow.
Oh.
So we do get there in the end.
Fantastic. All right. And that will be available at your site and also on drive-thru?
It will indeed, yes.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Let's talk about some of the features of that. What should people expect from that?
The entire war. The book we're releasing tomorrow, it's called The Fifth Frontier War, is kind of like a grand overview of how the war started and why, what things are going on where, and how it is going to more or less progress. However, Fifth Frontier War is kind of its own mini subline. You're going to see that it's branded slightly differently to the mainstream of Traveller books. And we expect to be publishing it for at least 2 or 3 years, probably 3 or 4 years. It's going to be a roughly 50-50 mix of source books. Example, the first one we've got coming out after this is War Fleets of the Fifth Frontier War, looking at the ships of both Zhodani and the Imperial Navy. But more than a ship's book, I mean, each ship is one complete chapter, so we're really diving into it. So about half the books will be source books looking at specific theatres or armies or whatever. And half of them are going to be adventure stroke campaign books. And the idea is you will be able to create, it's probably going to end up 3 or 4 different groups of characters. So you can bring your regular group of independent traders into it. You can have a group of people who are working for Imperial Intelligence or the Imperial Military, another lot on the Zhodani side, and we've got some ideas to do something similar with the Sword Worlds. But you'll be able to, through those groups, play through the entire Fifth Frontier War, see things from all perspectives, massively influence key events in the war, and pretty much end up deciding how the war ends. And we're going to make a promise that whatever ending you get to on your table will be canon.
Okay. Because of how the rules are written, or because of is this an alternate timeline? Like, how do you fit in like historical things into canon, or do you get a lot of pushback, or do you just tack it on to the end, or like, how do you do it?
We've had long talks with Mr. Miller about this, and people have latched on to the idea that if it's in print, it's canon.
Okay.
That has never been strictly true, and it's kind of been more leaning more towards if it's printed, it's canon, unless Mr. Miller says otherwise, which people can get on board with. So the way it works these days, if it's written, it's canon, unless somebody comes up with a better idea. It doesn't mean we're going to go stomping through decades of previously written Traveller history, but we're not going to be bound by every little concept that was created way back then anyway, because there are some that were not brilliant, others that were simply problematic. Some things we do there will be people that will say, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that," and there's going to be other things that people simply won't notice. For example, we were working on the Aliens of Charted Space books, which were designed to get the major aliens into the game so people could play them, could adventure against them, and so forth. Not necessarily having a deep dive, but basically getting all the rules in place. When we got to the drawing, you have this idea that you've got the different casts of drawing, and that's great. And it says that most drawing travelers are sports. They're the ones that have got the mindset to go out into the wide universe. And in the original material, it says all drawings male. I go, okay, call it Mr. Miller. Hey, Mark, he's drawing. It says only males go out. And he goes, yeah, that's probably not a good idea. Yeah, I think drawing are equal opportunities. We can have that. So male and female drawing can be sports now, okay. Which is a change to canon.
Sure, okay.
But I think we can agree that that's one we can all live with.
Yeah, I don't see a problem. I can see how a lot of people, what I want to say, they put a lot of importance into something, and it may not really matter. Changing it a little bit, it doesn't really change. Having female drawing also as sports, what does that really change? Right?
Exactly.
Nothing.
I mean, if
really.
we'd gone to the Aslan and decided, we don't like the idea that the female Aslan
that it's a matriarchy or something, or
great warlords. Yeah,
okay.
That would be a step too far. There are sacred cows in the canon that we won't take, but the way we were looking at that side of things. Okay, this is a bit of a secret. Travelers is a boys' game, always was, always will be, except it isn't. I mean, right from the very start, Mark had female gamers in mind. But the change we made, especially with second edition, is that we started featuring more women in the artwork, in the and on the front covers. We had women either commissioning or directing the art for all of those. So in a stroke, we kill the male gaze, so you don't have some women draped over, 20s draped over a spaceship or anything. You cut all that out.
All right.
And the thing we noticed relatively quickly afterwards, more women are playing Traveller now.
Yes.
I mean, who would have thought?
I've noticed that too in my analytics on my YouTube channels and my all my different traveler groups on Facebook. They started out like 99% male, and now they're down to like 98 or 97. So there is movement in that direction.
There is movement, and it is, when you think about it. I mean, it's. If you think about where Traveller was in the 80s, where you sit down with your little calculator and you make all your ships and generate all the trade routes and what have you, and it's very easy to think, well, that's not the kind of thing that a woman's going to be into. I mean, they're wrong, but in general, you can see that mindset.
It might have also been that, we were nerds and couldn't get girls to come over.
But Traveller is the easiest sell. I mean, if you say to a group, a mixed group of men and women, you might want to try Traveller. Have you watched Firefly? It's the easiest sell in the world.
Yeah. I always wondered, why was there such a disparity? Because in my group of friends, I have female friends that dress up like Klingons and go to Star Trek openings. Why aren't they playing? And yes, they are interested in Traveller, but they didn't know about it. But once I introduced it, they were like, yeah, hey, that sounds fun. And they might play a scientist, or they're not always into the male roles of I want to be a Marine, although there are female Marines, and that's fine. But they tend to be more scientists, or more, what I want to say, thoughtful characters instead of brutes. But then there's also men who have female characters in the game. So I mean, you can't just have everybody in the universe is a male. 'Cause that would be a problem.
No, I mean that's what we noticed. I mean, we would have. That's not the reason we made the change to the artwork. We did that because it just seemed a more sensible and grown-up approach. But that was the effect of the change.
Yes.
But no, in terms of canon, we're not going to blow up the Imperium. But you might see a little smoothing off, getting rid of some rough edges. If we find anything a little more, should we say, problematic in the older background, that will get a look at. But the aim is to keep Traveller current, so it doesn't feel like it was written in the 70s or early 80s.
Right. There's been 40 years of game mechanics improvement and things like that, and other games moving forward and incorporating those things, and you kind of got to keep up if you want to compete. I mean, not fad wise, but just bringing things forward, like the view of our computers back in the 70s is not what it turned out to be. So maybe that needs a little adjustment, but that's not going to be something that breaks everything.
But there are certainly sacred cows in Traveller, like you do get faster than light travel, but it takes a week to do a jump. That won't change. You don't get faster than light communications other than it being carried by a ship. That certainly won't change.
Right. I noticed that you have a pretty big, what do I want to say, maybe unofficial advisory committee. Like you tap the community, your Mongoose community, a lot for their opinions on things.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some, you'll see them credited in pretty much every book. We've got what we call the Inner Circle, which is basically a collection of people who have, in one way or another, been working very closely with Mark over the years. So they're kind of like the first level of, if we ever said we want the Darians to attack the Aslan and blow up all their stars, we would run it through by them first, and they'll tell us, no, that's a silly idea, stop it. But yes, we do like to engage with the wider Traveller community, firstly because we're gamers and we like talking about games, and Traveller's our favourite game, so we like talking about that. But we the internet does give kind of an immediacy in terms of response time, which can be a millstone around the neck at times. But I mean, if we want to post something fairly extensive, talking about this is kind of what we're thinking about, what do you think? We've got our forums for that. If if I'm literally sitting at my desk and something's popped into my head, and I think, well, perhaps I want a Traveller player to let me know whether this is a good thing or not, quickly jump onto Discord. There's always people there.
Yeah, that's great. Instant feedback from the community.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Speaking of the community, would you like to answer some community questions?
By all means, love to.
Then we'll get to some of your some more of your recent releases and some of the stuff for the future.
No worries.
So from David Benson, we have any plans for a Traveller video game?
Yes. Is the quick answer. There's a small developers based in our hometown of Swindon called Evil Twin Artworks. If anyone's been watching our social media over the past month or two, you will have seen they've just released a game called Victory at Sea Atlantic, which is based on our World War II naval combat miniatures game. It's the third one they've done for us. They have also in the background been working on not one but two Traveller video games. First one will be a squad-based boarding action game set in the Fifth Frontier War. You can take the part of either Imperial Marines or Zhodani troopers, and you've got to board an enemy ship, capture vital locations, and try to avoid getting counterboarded.
That sounds fun. Whatever happened? Oh, go on.
I was going to say, video games take a long time though, so that won't be this year.
Right. Well, you said you had two. What's the other one?
More traditional RPG based, isometric format. I think turn-based combat as well is what they're looking at. But they're going to be using a lot of the combat model from the boarding action game in the RPG. So that will come afterwards.
All right, cool. Whatever happened to, wasn't there like a Traveller AR augmented reality thing that had like ships launching out of your city and you could hold up your phone and see them flying around or something?
It's a lovely idea. I wasn't involved in that at all, and it's no longer with us, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I was like, that looks fun, and then it just disappeared, and I never knew what happened to that. All right. Patrick Harris asks, any plans for a Zhodani adventure or campaign series?
Yes, this is something we've been wanting to do. Okay, so through the classic Traveller era, the Zhodani and really the Soleimani were kind of like as seen the bad guys. To a lesser extent, the likes of the Sword Wielders as well. What we've been doing for the past few years is trying to, in a sense, humanize the Soleimani and the Zhodani, and making the Sword Wielders not utterly repellent to any women who want to play the game. So we've sat down and thought about how the Imperium sees these empires, which is what we figure is what was printed in for classic Traveller and beyond, and started to think about more. Well, these people are still human; they still think like humans, more or less. How can we start portraying them as first being places that you want to go visit and explore, and second, getting people to actually play a Soleimani or Zhodani character without being the bad guy? And one of the keys to that is having not just an adventure but an entire campaign set behind Zhodani borders, for example. So the first you're going to see of that is, in a way, we're writing right now the Zhodani core expeditions, which is something you'll be able to go along with and help with the exploration. But the first, should we say, hardcore campaign will come out of the Fifth Frontier War. You'll see it from the Zhodani perspective, and you'll see why things are being done the way the war's being conducted, and there are actually some very good reasons, and it's not because the Zhodani are naturally evil.
Okay. All right, good. Let's see. How about Don Hedrick suggests he'd like to see a tag on every piece of gear and tech identifying what is OTU and what is not.
Yeah, this has come up before. Now, the way we look at it, this has come up a lot of times before. We've had all sorts of conversations about this in the office. The way we look at it is that fundamentally Traveller is a toolkit that you can pick and choose all the tools you want to use in your game, and no one's going to gainsay that. Does that mean that, for example, everything in the central supply catalogue can be found within the Charted Space universe? Now, the first thing that pops off the top of your head is, well, no. There are some things that I don't want anywhere near my tabletop, thank you very much, and that's fine for your tabletop. Someone else is going to have a different opinion. And ultimately, I would say the Charted Space universe is huge. It is unbelievably massive, with so many people and civilizations and technologies. If you open up a central supply at a random page, put your finger down, someone is going to have built that somewhere, even if it didn't work out, or it died, or got forgotten, or it's lying in the bottom of a ditch somewhere. Chances are someone has tried that, and there is a tendency, and I'm thinking of spacecraft-based technology with this, there is a tendency for people to think, well, if A is clearly better than B, then A is going to be spread across the entire charter space universe. It doesn't work that way. It so doesn't work that way. There's all sorts of reasons why people, navies and entire empires will not go down a certain technological path, whether it's political or they're just wrong. They have to have things beaten out of them through war. We see it in the modern world. Famously, battleships in the Second World War turns out not to be such a good idea. You could argue they weren't that great an idea in the First World War. Today, what's going to fall down in the next major war? Maybe carriers. We don't know. But at the end of the day, it's a toolkit. If you want to use something in your games, do so with our blessing. If you want to have an entire slate of technology, like, I don't know, gravity hammers that are in Central Supply, don't have them in your game. Great. We're not going to force them on you.
Right. How about, there were some questions about revising the computer rules. What have you thought? What do you think about that?
Computers in
they weren't.
the moment
It was kind of vague. They didn't say, like, add in quantum computer what the rub was, but
no, I mean, we purposefully keep the actual functioning of computers fairly vague, same as we do with things like jump drive and maneuver drive. We don't want to explain it down to the nuts and bolts, because in 10 years' time, technology in this world is going to advance and we've got to change it all anyway. So keep it vague.
So you try to keep it just abstract.
Oh yes, absolutely. Plus, you can fill the gaps in with your own headcanon anyway. I mean, if you just want maneuver drive softly glowing, that's cool. If you want this great plasma jet coming out of them as you burst out of the atmosphere, I mean that looks really good. Even if it may not make a huge amount of sense for some people, for others it's perfectly natural. No, in terms of mechanics, we want to keep computers simple to use for players, keep them functional. What we really, really need to do, and I've been wanting to do this for a few years, is take a really deep dive into software, different types of software and different ways of using it. You saw the start of that in the latest High Guard. There's got the ship's computer chapter, and you can see us playing around with the different ways software can be used on board a spacecraft. I'd like to do that across the board. So yeah, that's project 487 to do. We're on project 12 at the moment.
Throw it in the queue. How about any plans for rules for running and building personal empires or fleets?
Yes, yes, that's something I'd like to do. The current thinking there is we'll have a starting point and build up to that. We've been talking about, again, for a couple of years now, and the Fifth Frontier War really did put a spanner in this. We will come back to it. We wanted to revisit the idea of belters and belt mining, and we figured we'd do a book on that. We'd include surface mining on planets as well, plus the start of travelers setting up their own little businesses as prospectors and belt miners. We'd follow that up with a merchant prince book where you can start running businesses in any sector and build them up to great subsector spanning or more corporations. And then the third step of that will be running your own mini empires, because we've started looking with the sector books we do at areas that aren't necessarily dominated by huge empires, so do have room for players to do that kind of thing in. I mean, that's one of the reasons we started with the Trojan Reach with the Pirates of Drenax campaign. So yes, we do have these ideas in our head, and we kind of know how to get there. We just need to find the writing time. I mean, so some idiot decided they were going to do the entire Fifth Frontier War. So,
This a community member says they love the Mercenary box set, but they feel like it could have used with more playtesting and editing. Are there any plans for revision to the abstract mass combat system?
Potentially, yes. For my money, the mercenary rules were one notch too complex. Because I mean they would have worked very well in like certainly the 80s and into the 90s and early 2000s, but we as a publisher, we want to concentrate more on the story of Traveller rather than what you need to do when you pull a calculator out. So we really need a system where your entire mercenary company, however large it is baked onto one sheet that's in front of all the players on the table. Now, we have been working on it's going to be difficult to explain. We've got two parallel Traveller projects going on at the moment that haven't got anything to do with the Traveller game you see now or Charted Space Universe, but they are exploring different aspects of the rules and using them in slightly different ways. One of these includes a system, a mass combat system with a recruitment mechanic as well, that would just coincidentally work very well as mercenary rules in Charted Space. So we'll do that, we'll get it working, and then we'll perhaps look back and doing a Mercenary Second Edition kind of angle. On that note, the Naval Campaigns Handbook that's in the Element Cruisers box set, incidentally, absolutely the wrong place for it. We know that now. But being the bridge crew of a big ship is something I think is very worthwhile exploring. And I would like to do that as a properly supported campaign style at some point, perhaps even its own separate RPG, kind of like Traveller adjacent. That's just a note scribbled on the back of an envelope at the moment.
Gotcha.
That's the kind of thing I'm thinking of, because we kind of laid out in the core rulebook different ways of playing Traveller. So you've got your trader campaign, your exploration campaign, your military campaign, mercenaries, and I wanted to give players the tools to really run with particular styles of campaign. Not just with a single book, here you go, but properly supporting it as almost kind of like a separate RPG. I mean, they all take place in the Charted Space Universe. So yeah, Mercenary be one of those, Bridge Crews be another. We're going to be in 2 months' time releasing Bounty Hunter, which is its own campaign type. I mean, obviously can link very closely into an independent trader campaign as well. We're probably going to be next year, but you're going to start seeing things this year as we test ideas out. Xenoarchaeology, basically Space Indiana Jones. Mm-hmm. Who doesn't want to play that campaign?
Mm-hmm. That's that sounds interesting to me, because I have my character I've been playing recently is a xenoastrocosmologist. So
excellent.
He'd fit right in. And he and one of the other people in the group is actually an archaeologist. So yeah, I would look forward to that. This next question is related, I think, to the TAS license. So what products are you looking for people to write?
You can do anything. I mean, that's the point of the TAS license. I mean, if it were me, looking back at Mongoose's very earliest days when we started with the D20 logo license, if I were to approach something like TAS now, I'll be looking to carve out my own space. I might drop Mongoose a line saying, hey, there's this really out-of-the-way sector that's never been touched before. If you're not thinking of anything, do it. I might do a couple of TAS bits and pieces, to which we say, oh, we've never even heard of that sector, knock yourself out. And then I would try and do something very much akin to one of our sector books like Spinnerwood Extents or Behind the Claw, what have you, but for that sector. start building up from there. But you could do absolutely anything. I mean, go into do an entire supplement on the I don't know, the exploration branch of the Scout Service, or I mean, if we weren't working on it right now, somebody could have done something about the core expeditions like years ago.
Right. So,
But charted space is so large, you could do absolutely anything.
how do you handle things like if somebody wanted to write a supplement about scouts, and then someone else also wanted to write a supplement about scouts? How do you reconcile those two things? Or are they just two standalone within TAS?
You mean within the context of the TAS program?
Yes.
That's good old market forces. The people, nobles of the Third Imperium, would approve.
So both would be listed, and then just whatever people could use whichever one they liked.
Yeah, people will gravitate to one or the other, and they'll both try and release a supplement for that, and whichever one sells best, that's probably going to be the winner.
Gotcha. All right.
So
there's room. There's room.
Oh, good Lord, yes.
Fantastic. Next question comes from Boris Sibik. He wants to know, while Pioneer is separate from the OTU, any source books planned for Malooz within the OTU? I would like to see on Antiquity and Near Space pre-2100.
As part of the official universe, no. Working on last year on adventure class ships and the small craft catalogue, I did find myself attracted to building ships that were absolutely as basic as possible. How low can we get the tech level on this ship? And you can make some reasonable approximations. I think it would be fun if we had a deeper dive into lower tech ships. So you could create craft that are being built in the real world today, or a little further on. That might be more of a specialized adventure than a whole source book, but we'll see how it goes. I do find the idea attractive.
How about a series of Boris also asks, how about a series of adventures that are centered around non-human races as travelers?
Yes. Well, as I said earlier, with the doing a campaign that's based solely within the Zhodani consulate with Zhodani characters also on the money, but we've been talking just a couple of weeks ago about doing the same thing for the Aslan, where you're all playing Aslan in there's some minor household and there's this great sprawling epic campaign. You easily do the same with Vargir. I don't know how you would do the Hivers, but I mean, we could take a swing at it at some point. And as for the Kukri, I suspect, as things stand, we're probably going to be more or less keeping them as adversaries, because the Kukri are the most terrifying threat to the charted space universe. People just don't know it yet.
All right. Is that something that how would you handle? Would you allow someone to write a Hiver Adventures under TAS, or is that too competing with your line?
Oh no, we have. There are no. There are basically no restrictions on TAS at all.
Okay.
I mean, people don't approach us. Can we do X, Y, and Z? They just do it.
Oh, okay.
There are rules about what you can and cannot do, but they're so very, very light. I mean, don't put Nazis into a campaign, for God's sake. But if other than that, you can do pretty much whatever you want. You don't need permission from us.
Okay.
It's your game. It's your supplement.
All right. Cool.
Maybe you can convince other people that what you've done is good for their games as well. That's the point of it.
All right. Cool. Would you ever consider like graduating somebody from the TAS group into canon? Like if let's say they wrote a good Hiver book or whatever, and you're like, hey, that's not too shabby, and it's really popular. Would you integrate that or propose that to the author? Or?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't read as much of the the TAS books as I ought to, and I tend not to have a look at the things that his I don't know 104 different rumors or patrons or events or whatever. The ones that are made of lists, very useful in a game, less interesting to read on a casual basis. But to answer your question, if somebody did an absolute knockout Hiver campaign on the scale of Pirates of Dranax, and it was met with a great acclaim, the publisher would probably be finding an email dropping into their inbox offering them a few squillion pounds for the rights to the text.
All right, cool. All right. Another question is, what future for 2300 AD beyond reproducing or improving the GDW line?
We're not really... we don't really want to improve the old line. We do want to break new ground. And we've been kind of finding a midway step between that. Things like Project Bayern. I mean, that's obviously based on one of the original adventures. But it's a full campaign box set now. It is a completely different beast. They just happen to be doing something vaguely similar. But we've got... the start of the Cave for War, which again does link back to the original books, but we got a different take on it. We're going into far more depth again, like we did with Bayern. The next book after that is going to be primarily rules based, but it's how to set up a colony and run a colony way out on the frontier. So you can you're flown to a planet with a few workers, technicians, and a pile of spare parts. You've got to build a colony out of that and get it to be self-sufficient. So yeah, I mean that's the kind of line we're looking at. So if there's something that we really need to look at, we had to cover the Cave for War one way or another, and Bayern was a passion project for the writer concerned. But no, we want to focus on the new stuff.
I see. Okay, good. Can we expect a supplement dealing with spycraft in the far future?
I would be very surprised if players weren't doing something very similar to that in the Fifth Frontier War.
All right, cool. Ross McClure asks, are there any plans for warehousing and distribution deals in the US and Canada so shipping the hardcovers wouldn't be so expensive, and to help game stores stock them and lower the price? Mongoose products usually carry $10 to $20 more per product per page than their competitors.
Not in the US, they don't. We've got our main warehouse is in the US. Most things go out by either USPS or FedEx. We charge, what is it, a flat $8 the shipping to anywhere in the US, regardless of quantity. And if you order more than $150 worth, we give free shipping in the US. Retailers can and do contact our warehouse directly. We will supply them. We will give them a fantastic discount and a very quick turnaround.
I was going to say, do they need to come to you directly, or are you set up with distributors like Chessex? And
we are. All the main distributors purport to carry our ranges, and for things like the core books, it's usually true. But if retailers ever have an issue, our warehouse is run by an outfit called Studio 2 Publishing. They always have our entire range in stock at all times.
All right, cool. Stephen Poor wants to know, will your fiction lines impact the direction of the game and vice versa?
Good question. At the moment, no. What we're doing with the fiction at the moment is twofold. Firstly, using it to say, hey, this is Traveller, this is what your games can be like. The recent series we've been doing by David Geimer, Sindel Sunrise, is a group of travellers getting into trouble as they wander across the Trojan Reach. The other thing we like to do with it is to zoom in onto specific aspects of either the universe as a whole, or specific locations and missions, adventures, and what have you. There's 3 or 4 short stories that in some way link into the Pirates of Dranax campaign. So there's one that if you go to Thief, you would have encountered the widows basically policing the streets. We've got a short story written from the point of view of one of the widows, so you get a better perspective. That's one of the things we want to achieve with fiction at the moment.
All right. This user, Ross McClure, asks, I'd be interested to hear more about license deals that Matt's allowed to talk about that could expand the Traveller brand. He feels like Traveller should be the D&D of sci-fi, and I think what he's getting at is there shouldn't be any competition with, like, what's that other star... the Paizo Starfinder. Those things shouldn't. In this letter that he wrote, he's like, those things shouldn't even be a consideration to Traveller. The Traveller should just crush them. So how do you feel about that?
A few things to say on that. Firstly,
and he plans to dominate the universe as the sci-fi RPG. I thought you already do.
if you ask a bunch of random role players to name a sci-fi role-playing game, and they don't say something licensed like Star Wars or Star Trek, there's a decent chance that the first words out of their mouths will be Traveller. As for something like Starfinder, it is a very different game to Traveller. It's not scratching the same itch. I don't know how well Starfinder sells. I mean, you presume it does well because Paizo's behind it, but I really don't know. I can say Traveller's probably doing better than most people expect. And we're going through a decent print run of the core rulebook every year or so. What was that question about licensing?
Well, it was if they would be interested to hear more about license deals that you're allowed to talk about that could expand the Traveller brand.
Yeah. I mean, we spoke about video games earlier. We got the comics starting to roll out now.
Oh, right. Yeah, I read the first one. It was good.
Second one's coming very, very soon. It's like 2 or 3 weeks away or something.
I thought it was great that there was all kinds of iconic stuff in there, like, everyone hop in the air raft. You know?
Yeah. I mean, the problem with licensing is, if I can talk about it, it's we would already have announced it, and you might even have it already in your hands.
Gotcha.
But we're always looking to get Traveller into other mediums.
What about other types of projects like Traveller merch or board games, card games?
Yep. We have had discussions about those as well.
Okay. All right. Here's a question. Is there anything in the works for IP license that deal with larger companies like film companies?
We are always having conversations of that nature, sure.
Some folks wanted to know why there was no Traveller movie or TV show.
There nearly was just a few years ago. I'm not going to mention companies, but we literally got a call from Hollywood, and the conversation went as far as getting contracts sent over to us. A showrunner had been appointed, one that anyone into sci-fi TV series has absolutely heard of, but it just wasn't right for us. In the end of the day, they wanted too much for too little, and we were better off without it. But there's lots of Hollywood production companies out there, and we'll carry on having conversations. You never know. All
right, sure. Let's see. Some folks wanted to know, will you ever be using decimal points in your numbers?
Now, yeah, there's a little story behind that. With The reason we do it that way is because it's the same reason that we capitalize what we call defined game terms. So if we're ever talking about making a strength check, we won't simply write strength. We put STR in capitals. Same with dice modifiers. Same with something like, I don't know, initiative is always capitalized. It's so when you're playing a game and you're just, oh my God, where is that roll? You quickly scan down text and your eyes lock onto that capitalization. Same with the numbers. It's a way to differentiate money from other big numbers, because we're dealing with space. There's always big numbers somewhere.
Sure.
Now, what I wanted to do when this first occurred to me with second edition, I chickened out then. Was going to do it with the update 2024. I chickened out then as well. What we were going to do was properly introduce the concept of kilo credits.
Oh, good. I was going to ask about that. Kilo credits and mega credits.
So you have credits, kilo credits, mega credits, and as you get into Fifth Frontier, billion credits become a thing. And that will completely remove the problems, because it's in the tens and hundreds of thousands of credits. That's where the problem lies. I know it. I'm sorry. I'm going to take a deep breath next time we do the core rule book, and hopefully kilo credits will get in.
I pointed out to him that Americans expect we use decimals for decimal points and commas for grouping, and Europe does it the other direction. And so, at the risk of alienating one or the other, it seems like and having to like print two versions, it just makes sense to come up with a happy medium and everybody and have nobody happy. Or just lump it. That's how it is. But I do miss personally kilo credits and mega credits. Let's see. There was some complaining about the about editing. Nobody really said what their editing problem was, but I personally noticed like sometimes charts might have one line says credits and then the next line credits isn't in it, or it's just minor, nothing that like affects the game, like is a flat out giant typo or thing that messes up the game. So personally, I haven't had that's not a rub for me, but I have seen it around, and almost there was a response to that. I mean, about that in almost all the forums I asked. So, do you have any plans for improving editing or explanation why things get by sometimes?
Sure. We have one, sometimes two editors work on each book, and that isn't two editors doing like half the book each. They go through the entire thing themselves. We have professional proofreaders go through things. Books often get sent back to the author to have a check, because it's very different spotting an issue in Word as compared to when it's all laid out. That's incidentally why we do proofing after layout and not on the basic Word document. But at the end of the day, it is a human process and problems get through. And yes, you won't believe how much we kick ourselves when something does go awry. I did see another publisher on Twitter a little while ago. They said the very best way to find a typo in any book is go through the editing process, layout, proofing, send it off to print, put it on sale, wait 6 months, then pick up a copy of the book, open random any page, and one will leap out at you. That is very common feeling in the industry.
Right. Yes, it's difficult. The books are hundreds of pages, and stuff can sneak by. I mean, I'm just saying being a technical writer,
if you figure the average source book has pretty much the same word count as a novel. It's not, and it swings constantly between technical writing, prose, sometimes fiction as well. It is a human process. We do try hard. We continue striving. Sorry.
All right. That's acceptable. That's a good answer. Let's talk about let's talk about your product line. Some of the things that you've put out recently that you'd like to promote. I see, like, well, I noticed. Did Maker God go through a reprint?
You were asking earlier about Taz stuff moving to mainstream Mongoose Publishing. That's what happened to Maker God.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the original writer is one of the frontline traveller writers anyway, and he said to us, "Hey, I've got this thing. Do you? It would be really cool if you formally printed it and gave it pretty artwork and what have you." Took a look at it. Well, yeah, we'll do that.
All right. Yeah, I noticed the cover art's been unified with the other Traveller style art, so it looks good.
Yeah.
So what about the Deep in the Dark?
Yes. Yeah, one of our sector books. We weren't planning on doing that at all. But it's okay. When we have a new writer approach us, the standard way of handling things is somebody that says they want to write for Traveller. Fine, we say do a few articles for JTAS, because that can be anything from like 1 to a dozen pages in Word. So it's very simple for them to get to grips with. It's very easy for us to quickly go through their text and see if they've got the chops or not. And if somebody does a few JTAS articles, we might approach them and say, hey, do you want to try something a bit longer, a 32-page adventure maybe? And if that all goes well, you start, maybe they start working on the big hardbacks. That's exactly what Chris Griffin did. We never... If somebody just comes up and says, hey, I've written this entire book, do you want to publish it? I mean, the answer is going to be no, because it's not going to be very good, because they haven't gone through the process. Right. This is what happened with Gear when he did, what was it, Spinwood Extends. He says to us, I've written this entire sector book. It's like Behind the Claw, but it's in this different region of space. And said, well, all right, we'll take a look at it. And it was good. It was damn near publishable straight from the original manuscript. I mean, hideously overwritten, which is why you'll see Spinwood Extend stuff sprinkled in other books. But that never happens. But Gear is now one of our frontline writers. With the Deep in the Dark, it happened again. This time, a chap called Randy Dorman approached us. Hey, I've done this whole thing on Dark Nebula. Do you want to see it? Sure. And again, it was publishable. Again, hideously overwritten to the extent that we hacked out a massive amount of generic non-sector based information on Aslan clans, and he's now working on a book called Clans of the Aslan. So there's going to be another book for the feline fans out there.
Oh, cool. So you're using the so JTAS and these and also maybe the TAS license kind of like as your farm league for writers in a way, or could be.
Yeah, I mean, I did touch on this on an interview on EN World not so long ago. We've, being the kind of publisher we are, we do get the Mr. Big Shot freelance writer. I've written for WotC, Steve Jackson Games, every other company, and now I'm thinking about writing for Mongoose as well. And we have never... In all the years we've been publishing and taking work from people like that, we've never come across one that we would rate half as well as someone like Martin or Chris, because they don't get Traveller. And the idea somebody can just rock up and begin writing for Traveller without a deep understanding of the universe, it just doesn't fly. I mean, I said earlier, in my early years, I'd done some freelance work for Warhammer, and I can tell you, Games Workshop doesn't care how many writing credits you've got. They don't care if you're Stephen King. They want you to understand their universe, and that's why it's so good, because you get the right writers. Right. And to our minds, there may be fewer Traveller players than Warhammer players, but to the people playing Traveller, it's just as important.
Right. All right, let's talk about Whispers in the Abyss.
That was a stealth release. Between you and me, and pretending no one else is listening, Whispers on the Abyss was the first Fifth Frontier War book. We just didn't brand it that way. It's a mini campaign that will get a trader crew into the right area of the Spinwood Marches, and in the original outline, it was going to be and the players inadvertently trigger the Fifth Frontier War. That doesn't happen anymore because we thought that was a bit cheesy. But they will be doing something really tragic that will have massive implications. And if they're lucky, they won't realise that they've done it.
Their characters won't need counselling afterwards. All right. How about Wrath of the Ancients?
That's our Gonzo book. So we started years ago doing Secrets of the Ancients book, which was a complete reimagining of the original Secrets of the Ancients from Classic Traveller. And we blew it up into a 256-page book. So it's completely self-contained, but we always had lurking in the back of our heads, what if we made that a trilogy? Because we've done Pirates of Dranax, which is stupidly huge. But while that was a sandbox, here's a more linear style campaign. And so you got you're covering both bases for what referees like. Either they want their place where they can just explore, or they can, particularly more the lazy games masters like me, they want a starting point and just work through with their players. So that's what the Ancients campaign was supposed to be. So a little while ago, we did the prequel, which was Mysteries of the Ancients, which incorporates Twilight's Peak and Research Station Gamma. Again, completely reimagined from what it was, but also tying into our Secrets of the Ancients book. And then we capped it off with Wrath, and we kind of gave the writer permission to really go for it. It operates at a power level that has, as far as I can recall, never been even approached in Traveller before. There is the potential for the players to become as gods, with the power of the ancients behind them. And then you can kind of decide what you're going to do with the campaign after that. I suggest they, fly off to the core or something and leave charted space alone. But, travellers be travellers.
All right, cool. And then recently you've put out the Traveller Companion update for 2024.
Yeah, that was a really minor update. I mean, every time we bring out one of these update books, we do try and take pains to say, look, you don't need to buy this book because the one you've got already, that will work. That works perfectly now. It will be compatible with all the books we're releasing for this edition down the road. And with this companion, we mentioned to the writers we were doing it, and Chris stepped up and said, hey, I've been thinking about this chapter on for vector-based combat, and it's perfect for a book like The Companion, which is basically a toolkit for the rules anyway. So that's the only new material in it. The reason we did the update for it was the original reason we started doing the updates books in the first place. We wanted to make them prettier because the quality of artwork has massively improved since they were first released. So we saw the companion was coming to the end of one of its print runs, so that's the time to do it. That's why it came out just a short while ago.
Are you trying to make an effort of updating all putting out all the updates within proximity to each other, or are you just as they come?
Oh, it'd be lovely to do that, wouldn't it? No, unfortunately. And we are working on different things at different parts of the game at different speeds in different places. I mean, it would be marvellous if we could wave a magic wand and have every one of the core rule books updated within 3 months of each other, every 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it ends up being. Yeah, that ain't never going to happen.
That's never happening.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the benefit we have by taking the approach where we say your old book is still going to be compatible, it means everything doesn't have to be done all at once. So you've got this kind of rolling thing. It also means Traveller as a game is never going to be finished. It's always going to be tweaked, improved with new things added. And I think that's the way it should be.
I see also you put out the adventure class ships a few months ago, and then the small craft catalog.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell us a little bit about those? What's an adventure class ship?
Basically, anything 2,000 tons and under is what we've included in that book. The idea was twofold. Firstly, to give travelers more choices with the ships they're flying, so they're not always. I mean, I swear 90% of groups are either in Type S Scouts or free or far traders.
Mm-hmm.
When we've actually got substitution rules in that book, so you rolled up a free trader, fine, you can have one of those or one of these other ships. So you've immediately got some variety there to so the players get more of a feeling of ownership of their own craft.
So you made some variations on each of the classic, like a couple of scout variations and a couple of far trader variations and so on. Okay.
And we set things up so players can also qualify themselves for a slightly larger or more expensive ship of a similar type. I mean, they're going to be in debt up to the eyeballs, but that's not going to stop a traveller. But the other point of doing books like that was for referees to populate the space lanes around different worlds, and that's particularly important in something like I very much had in my head Pirates of Dranax, when players are actively going out boarding, forcibly boarding other ships, and you don't just want them to be, here's another far trader, here's another subsidized merchant, just to kick things up a bit. You've now got this massive expanse of vessels to choose from, and indeed hunt you down if you're a pirate. But it just makes it more of a lived-in universe. We are working on another ship's book at the moment. I don't want to flood people's libraries with this kind of book, because having access to lots of ships is great. But I think there's probably some reasonable limits.
So we've got a month between the recording of this interview and Mayday. Do you have any, you mentioned the Fifth Frontier War, and if you want to talk more about that, we can. Do you have, in addition to that, do you have any other releases coming out during that time?
Yes, the big one is going to be a system history of Traveller.
I saw that advertised.
Yeah, we reached, was it going to be 2 years ago now? We reached out to Shannon Appelkline, who'd done the Designers and Dragons series, basically doing the chronology of the entire role-playing industry, and asked him, would he like to do a book that was focused purely on the life of Traveller. He said, yes, I loved it. I said, I quickly fired a line off to Mark saying, hey, what do you think about this idea? I think it's perfect, he says. Yes, I'll make myself completely available to Mr. Appelkline. And it's being laid out right now, just putting finishing touches on it, actually. But it covers from the start of GDW right through the classic Traveller era. It goes into all the third-party publishers like Paranoia Press, FASA, Game Laws, etc., through the Mega Traveller New Era days, and also the reasons why certain things were being done in the background, because Shannon was interviewing people and dredging up old articles and interviews, and really getting to the meat. If you want to find out why Traveller is the way it is today, that's the book to get.
All right, cool. What anything else? Other
I don't know if it isn't released by the time people hear this interview, it's going to be very imminent. You've got the Bounty Hunter campaign. Basically, fulfill your inner Mandalorian. It's had a huge amount of development with it, both in terms of the rules, but also we wanted to get the vibes exactly right. So you can do your Mandalorian, you can do your Boba Fett, you can do your John Wick. If you want to do your sci-fi Western, it's going to have everything you need in that. that we've managed to sprinkle plenty of homages throughout.
Oh, great. All right, and then let's talk a little bit more about the Fifth Frontier War. What will people what should people expect, or what kind of surprises might there be in that book?
The surprise is going to be more than just the book. I mean, the idea of this book is to form the anchor point for everything else that comes after. As I say, Fifth Frontier War is going to be its own subline that's going to run for 2, 3, 4 years into the future. It's going to chart different aspects of the war from different perspectives. You won't be stuck on the Imperial side at all. You'll get it. You'll see what it looks like from the Zhodani side, and just why it's absolutely imperative that you plough forward into the space of those stinking, lying Imperials. We're going to be seeing what's happening in the sword worlds with the Vargir. Darians are going to be popping up into it. You're going, as players, you will be on. As I say, there's different campaign types, so you're going to be on the front lines of massive land battles. You're going to be in the midst of ambushes with involving entire fleets. You'll be working on the diplomatic side, trying to get all the imperial nobles trying to go in roughly the same direction. You'll be conducting espionage and analysing intelligence. You'll be free traders just trying to survive and make a living whilst the universe is exploding around you. Whatever aspect of the Fifth Frontier War we look at, will be putting the players around your table in the front seat, and they will be able to have a very definite effect on the war, perhaps even going in a different direction to what has been reported as canon in the past.
I see.
But as I say, whatever you end up with on your table, I promise it will be canon.
I can't wait to see how that's going to work out. What about I lost my train of thought here. Something that you just said had gave me a question. Yeah, it's gone. Oh no, I was going to make a comment about how thorough your book seemed to be to me. When I say, well, what about this, and then I look, it's there in the book. So you do a lot of what I want to say, like you seem to be putting in things that the customer is already thinking about. So that's another thing that I appreciate about your books. They're thorough. They're not overly detailed. They give you enough room as a GM to fill in the gaps with your own ideas. Like as you mentioned before, just you kind of leave it at an abstract level and then let people fill in their own imagination.
That's essential for Traveller, possibly for any RPG. But it reminds me, we'd had a new player pop up on our forums a few years ago, just getting to grips with Traveller, and they'd picked up Behind the Claw, and they wanted to play in the Spinwood Marches, and they said, "There's not enough detail in here. You haven't detailed every single world." Well, no, we're never going to, because whilst we might detail the starport at Glisson, we might do one day, conceivably, we could do a giant box set with loads of maps and detail all the shops in it, and that would be great. But we're not going to do that for every starport in the Spinwood Marches. We're not going to detail every world in the Spinwood Marches. Some worlds we might never do them more than one short paragraph, because we've got to give referees the ability to flesh things out for themselves and tell their own stories. I mean, it's been a long-running thing in Traveller. You only ever detail the main world in a system, because if the referee needs some far-flung moon, he can just put it in there and he won't be contradicting anything that's come before. So yeah, that's what we try and do. Right.
Oh, last year at this time there was the OpenGL panic. How did that ever shake out with Mongoose?
It took a while to sort things out, but what's he calls the wobble with the OGL and Traveller players immediately start saying, well, what about Cepheus engine? That's that whole thing rides on OGL. So we immediately reached out to the main Cepheus publishers and said, look, we can try and work something out here. If the rug gets pulled from under you, first of all, don't panic. We'll cover you until we can come to a more formal agreement. But we saw the opportunity as well, because we hadn't, aside from the TAS program, and for a print publisher, that's not attractive at all. But other than that, we hadn't opened up the current edition of Traveller in any way. Well, maybe this is something we can talk about. Maybe we can help each other out. So we had long conversations with the Cepheus publishers. We had even longer conversations with lawyers trying to draw up a whole new agreement. Floated that agreement with the Cepheus publishers. This is what we were kind of like discussing. Do you agree with everything? And they, made some little tweaks and what have you. That got revised. And that's ended up with the Traveller Compatibility license, which is basically a royalty-free way for publishers to produce material for the current edition of Traveller. TAS remains the path to do pretty much absolutely anything, including engaging with the Charted Space Universe. That's only through drive-through. And we've recently posted Mark Miller's fair use policy on our website. Next year, early next year, you will see that all editions of Mongoose's Traveller will also be formally part of fair use as well.
Interesting. So can you take a brief moment to explain the licensing tiers as they stand now? So there's like fair use at the bottom, and then TAS, and then Mongoose compatible. Is that how it goes? Or
you say at the bottom, fair use is the most permissive of all of them. You can basically do pretty much anything you want in terms of publishing for Traveller, as long as you don't charge any money for it. And in that, you can do anything with any edition. I mean, if you wanted to take all the ships from Mega Traveller and translate them into New Era or T4 rules, you can do that right now. And as I say, we'll be folding our editions of Traveller into that as well. So, hey, you want to take those Mega Traveller ships and convert them into current edition Traveller, be our guest. So in many ways, the fair use policy is kind of like the top tier one.
Well, my tier structure was like how far away from Traveller licensing they are, like a Traveller endorsement, I guess is what I'm thinking. So like the next tier up would be TAS for commercial purposes.
Well, sure. I mean, in terms of endorsement, we don't really get into that.
Well, you get the Traveller compatibility stamp on your thing.
No, we don't.
Okay.
You're free to do pretty much whatever you want. I mean, there are certain rules to follow, like, for instance, on with the TAS program on drive-through, you can't use AI art, for example. You can't do 2300 or older editions of Traveller. But other than that, you can do whatever you like, and as long as you go through drive-through, you charge money for it. It's a very permissive license. Traveller Compatibility license, again, you can do pretty much whatever you want, so long as you don't touch the IP. Official Charted Space Universe. And you won't have to pay us any money for it. Go ahead and knock yourself out, and you get to use put the Traveller logo on the front of it. I mean, the only caveat to that is there is a clause in that license that says if you be an absolute twit about something that you're publishing, then we can close that down. But again, just don't do books on Nazis. It's quite simple.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. No. Sounds great. Let's talk about plans between now and next Mayday. What do you have in the hopper for coming out? You want to talk about uh, uh, Pioneer a little
Yeah,
bit, or
that's one of the ones that floated to the top of my head. I mean, we got this. It's only May, which isn't that deep into 2025, and I can say, well, we've been doing X, Y, and Z, and it's going to sound very great, but there's always the possibility that things get derailed. For example, Martin's been working on Fifth Frontier War books. The first Fifth Frontier War book comes out tomorrow. We've already got the manuscripts for 2 more, so you're going to start seeing them coming out in on a fairly regular basis. He was all set to do books 3 and 4 when I came up with this whiz idea. We published a bunch of PDF-only books based on the Borderlands subsector of the Trojan Reach in our first edition books. And we just happened to be starting a new Traveller campaign in the office, and I'd picked the Borderland, and I remembered, oh yeah, we did this book, so I can use this for source material as I plot out the first adventures. Then it suddenly struck me, do you know, we could compile all this, convert it into the new edition, tidy it up a bit, add new material, and that is, the Borderland is such a great place for a beginning or lazy, like me, referee, because it's you can create a sandbox from those 2 star clusters, but it's very contained. People aren't likely to leave those star clusters unless they've got a high jumping ship. So once you've got a lot of freedom, but the referee doesn't have to memorize an entire sector. It's just a few star systems. So wouldn't that be a great product to release? Super detail the Borderland, and you've got this ready-made sandbox for people to play in. So I contacted Martin and I said, yeah, I know you're doing Fifth Frontier War at the moment, but do you just want to do like 20 odd pages, add some new material to Borderland? And he comes back to me, yeah, it's going to be more like 80 pages, but I'll get it to you by the end of the month. So that means that one of the Fifth Frontier War books will be a month later than we had originally planned. So this kind of thing happens all the time. But Borderland is one of the ones you'll see before the next Mayday. We've got the Singularity campaign coming hopefully the bottom end of this year. It starts off in the Imperial Core. It's going to be another epic campaign in the mold of Pirates of Dranax and Deep Night Revelation. There's going to be a possibly highly dangerous AI involved. The players will get mixed up with some machinations going on there. They will end up traveling over huge swathes of the Charted Space Universe. It's not confined to the Imperial Core at all. And at the end of it, they will be questioning not only the nature of their humanity, but also the nature of their own reality. But beyond that, yes, we got Pioneer, which is, as I say, uses the Traveller rules, but it's its own core rule book. The idea is it's set 10 to 30 years into the future of our own world, and it's all about the exploration of the solar system. The whole idea behind it is that your travellers, or pioneers as we call them, will be the first. They will be the first to set up a moon base, the first to mine an asteroid, the first to set down on Mars, and their main adversary is going to be the environment, both travelling there and at their destinations. It doesn't have a combat chapter. I mean, you can punch someone or shoot someone or swing a wrench at someone. That is counted as just another skill. But yeah, combat is not the thing here. It's not the Expanse. It's more, think Gravity, think The Martian. 2001 would be possible, but we're actually looking at that as being an expansion, where everything in the core rule book will be Mars and closer to the sun.
What's the objective of Pioneer? It's to settle some near the moon and Mars, or
It's space stuff is cool. And whilst it's great being able to jump 6 parsecs at a time, it's more of a challenge to actually get to Mars with today's technology, land and start building the first base there, start growing the first plants there. That's the challenge of the game. And it's also going to be, you're going to be doing things that you're very likely going to be seeing on your TV screens being filmed in real life in the next handful of decades.
Mm. So is there like a list of victory conditions when you start off? There's a DM and a player? I mean, is there like a list of, in this adventure, you're going to, you have to build a habitat and a garden and a energy array or something?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be assigned your mission objectives, and completing those, not dying and getting back home. That will be the victory. You can get sent on other missions, but we've got this mentor mechanic in there that if your pioneer successfully completes a mission or two, they become very much respected within the space-going community. When you create a new pioneer, you can say, my old character there, they've been mentoring me, so I get these benefits and bonuses while I'm floating around Venus or something. But yes, that's the core of the game. Again, think something like Martian. That could absolutely happen in Pioneer.
Cool. All right. Is there anything else that I forgot to cover?
I think we've covered an awful lot this time around, haven't we?
Yeah, we really have.
Yeah.
Matt, I really super appreciate you coming and doing this with me. Your support means a lot, and thank you very much, very, very much.
It's always fun. Thank you.
Yes. All right. So tell us where can people come and hang out? Do you have what are your mainly active social areas?
Well, I'm pretty bad at social media myself, but slowly and dimly I'm beginning to figure it out. I pop up on Discord normally two or three times a day. You can always reach us through Facebook or Twitter. Our own forums are pretty active. I've probably forgotten one of the social medias sites we use there.
I do notice the Mongoose forum very active.
Yeah,
and
I mean that's the place to get into the really in-depth stuff.
Right. And then how about your Discord? Looks pretty active as well.
It does. There's always something going on there. So I'd say I'll pop on 2 or 3 times a day, either to let people know what I'm doing or ask someone's opinion about something, or just check in and see what the conversation is, and sticking my oar in. Right.
I noticed that there's an official Mongoose Facebook page, and then there's one that's like a fan run.
Yes.
They both are seem very active. I noticed there's a lot of posts to the official Mongoose Facebook page. Every time you put out a product or things like that, you engage the audience and put out notifications there. So that's awesome.
Reddit as well.
Oh, and Reddit. All right, cool. And then how do people get your products? Is it MongoosePublishing.com or?
It is indeed. That's always going to be the first place. You'll see everything on there as soon as it goes live. If you buy a hard copy from us, you get the PDF for it free immediately. But other than that, talk to your local game stores. Their distributors can get a hold of our books. If not, your retailer can always approach Studio 2 Publishing direct, and they'll sort them out. If they're not in the US, contact us direct. We'll sort you out. All
right, cool. We've come to the end of our interview with Matthew Sprange from Mongoose Publishing. Thank you so much for joining us again this year.
Thank you. It's been great.
And thank you, dear travelers. Until next time, happy traveling. Don't fly solo through the galaxy. Click like to join our alliance. Subscribe for your crew pass. and enable notifications to never miss an encounter. This journey is fueled by my patrons. Thank you, patrons. Feel the thrill of discovery. Become a patron and join the adventure.